This is the Sony 16mm f1.8, and I've had this lens for about a month now. So in this video, what I want to do is talk about this lens, talk about the different features, show you some footage using this lens, and see if it's a lens that you might be interested in. Quick disclaimer, Sony sent this out to me as a loaner for the last month. However, Sony has not paid me to make this video. They have not paid me to say anything. So this video is just my thoughts around using this lens for the past month. The first thing is, what is this lens? It's a 16mm for full frame cameras, and it opens up to an f1.8. So if you're someone who's using the 20mm 1.8, it's gonna feel very similar to that, just a wider field of view, and also it's smaller and more lightweight. That's a big factor with this lens. It's tiny. I mean, you could see right here, this lens weighs nothing. I have the actual specs here. It's 304 grams, really light. So you put this on front of your camera if you have something like a ZV-E1. I use the A9 III, and it's just a small setup. Now, design-wise, this is like every other Sony lens that's been coming out lately. It's got your focus ring, it's got an aperture ring, and your aperture can be clicked or declicked. So if you want to have that smooth aperture rotation, you have an iris lock, and then you have your autofocus, manual focus, and then you have a custom button. So pretty much like every other lens that Sony's been coming out with recently, it's got everything you would expect. Now, the front element is a 67mm. So this fits with a lot of the other Sony primes, like the 35mm, the 50mm, the original 20mm. They all have this 67mm filter ring, which makes it super easy to be able to switch your ND filters or polarizers or whatever you're using in front of your camera. I like the consistent 67 across the whole range of primes, and really this only gets bigger once you get up to that 85mm. Otherwise, 67mm is kind of a consistent filter range size that you find on a lot of Sony's lenses. Now, since I got this about a month ago, I've taken it with me everywhere that I've gone, and I've shot all of my videos with it. So you can see this is some A-roll that I've shot using this lens. So if I'm shooting in this vlog style, or I have the camera on a tripod, I've been using this lens as kind of my main A-roll lens, and I've been shooting at an f1.8 with ND filters. And so you could get this super shallow depth of field, and it does look a little bit different than if you're shooting on something like a 2.8. Right now, I'm shooting on my 28-70 f2, and even though it's an f2 versus a 2.8, there is a difference. Like, if you're trying to get that shallow look, getting into that f2 or the f1.8 or f1.4 range has a very distinct look versus the f2.8 range. So that's why you find with a lot of these lenses that are coming out, when they have this faster aperture, you can get this more shallow depth of field, and it just has this more cinematic quality, if I want to use that term. But it just has like this different look that has a little bit more professional look to it, or a little bit more like a movie, and you just don't see as much. Now, obviously you don't want to shoot everything at an f1.8, but it gives you that ability to have your videos just stand out a little bit, and it just has a very distinct look. Personally, I like shooting wide open like this. You can see with this 28-70 f2, creates a really unique look where a lot of focus is on your subject, me, right here, talking to you. And when you're outside shooting on the 16mm f1.8, you can see that there is a lot of focus to who you're capturing, whether that is you or that is someone else, or it's just something that you're shooting. You can create a lot of focus with that wide open aperture. Now, all of this footage that you're seeing was graded with my set of adventure LUTs. These allow you to do quick color grading and get a really good look out of all the footage that you're filming. I use my set of adventure LUTs for all of my videos here on this channel, and I'll put a link down below in the description to where you can get these if this is something you want to use for your videos when you're out shooting. Now, I've also been using this lens for a lot of B-roll. And so a lot of my videos, I've been just shooting the B-roll on this lens, and there's some unique characteristics that make it very good for shooting B-roll. Now, for video shooters, you could track with your autofocus up to 120 or even 240 frames per second and have razor sharp focus. You don't really hear the autofocus, and it's fast. Like with my A9 III, you see it just lightning fast, just latch onto the subject, and you don't hear it at all. Now, it has focus breathing suppression, but if you are using a camera with the focus breathing compensation, then you won't see any focus breathing whatsoever. And for minimum focus distance, it's 0.15 meters. So you could really get close up to your subject with this. And you could see from some of this footage, I was using it for close-up kind of shots to be able to get some interesting B-roll where you really close in on a subject, but you still have this super wide field of view. Now, this lens is dust and moisture resistant. So I was actually out shooting a silent video for my second channel where I was climbing a mountain in the wind, lots of dust, and I used this lens to basically shoot that entire video, everything except for the drone shots, because I was using a DJI drone for those. However, I was able to get some really good footage with this lens, and I was using a mix of the super shallow depth of field, but then also just using the wide angle to really capture the scene that I was filming. Now, if you want to see that video from end to end and really see the performance of this lens, I'll put a link to it down below in the description. But also, this lens is good for vlogging. And I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of creators are going to be interested in this lens. It's a 16mm full frame. It doesn't weigh very much when you're vlogging or you're using it on something like a gimbal, and it just makes everything super small and compact while still having that f1.8, which gives you a ton of light. So this will be great for low light situations. If you want to do some astro with it, it will work well for that. And it gives you that super shallow depth of field if that's what you're looking for. And the price of this lens is going to be $799. Now, would I pick up this lens? So that's an interesting question because I do really like the 16mm f1.8. Like, this lens is awesome. And if this had come out a few years ago when the 20mm came out, I would probably be using this as my main go-to lens. However, Sony also has the 16-25 f2.8. And personally, that is the lens that I've been using for all of my vlogging, all of my behind the scenes, and just kind of the lens that sits on my camera if I just need a wide lens and I want to get some shallow depth of field in the footage. I think an f2.8 looks great, and having that little bit of zoom range actually does make a difference, especially when paired with my A9 III, which I could use APS-C mode. So it really gives me like a 16-37.5, something like that. So it's a toss-up because I really like my 16-25. I do really like this lens, but because I already have that 16-25, I'm probably not gonna get this one. But that doesn't mean that this isn't a great lens for you. If you're someone that likes working with primes, you want a full frame and you want as much light gathering as you can out of a lens, then the 16 is going to be a super great option. And you really can't beat how small and compact this is for someone who is doing travel, adventure. You just want a small, wide lens. This is fantastic. So if you want to see more about the 16mm f1.8, I'll put a link down below in the description to where you can see all the details about this lens. And next, you should check out this playlist right here. It goes through a ton of videos on how you can make better videos, especially if you're someone who's doing outdoor and adventure style content. So I'll see you over there.